standing beside the Great Ouse in Ely, Cambridgeshire, in a part of the city called the Waterside. Until the Second World War, this was pretty much a slum area with factories, breweries, slaughterhouses and scrapyards. But today it's all been gentrified and it's very popular with tourists. My dad was born on the Waterside in 1935, and before him, my grandparents, my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents. In 1876, one of those great-great-grandfathers, a violent man called Elijah Carter of Prickwillow, was convicted at Cambridge Magistrates Court of smashing up the public bar of the pub behind me, the Cutter Inn. As well as being sent to prison, he and all his family were banned from the pub for life. I'm not sure if this ban is still in force. I often think about it when I have a pint here. This is Crown Point. The local kids used to call it the Diamond. My dad remembered in the 1940s, all the children from the streets around here would come together to play big games of rounders in it. This is Willow Walk. It gets its name from the basket weaving industry that was here for much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Willow Walk had small yards off of it with houses and small workshops in them. And it was in one of them, Raby's Yard, that my dad was born. This is the City of Ely War Memorial, which has a number of my relatives on it. Arthur Page, over here, one of my great-grandfathers, was killed on the Somme, and below him, Herbert Page, was killed at Ypres. On this side, Herbert Cross, who was my great-grandmother's brother, was killed in Gaza. Until 1965, the Isle of Ely was a separate administrative county. But then, under the Local Government Act, it became part of Cambridgeshire. The building behind me is the headquarters of East Cambridgeshire District Council, but in an earlier incarnation, it was the Grange Maternity Hospital, and this is where I was born. Of course, what Ely is most famous for is its great cathedral. Is built on one of the larger islands in the Fens, and the ground is very soft, and because of this the cathedral tends to sink. In the 1860s and then in the 1980s it was found that parts of it were in danger of collapse and emergency repairs were required. Until the 1930s, the Ely Lady Chapel was the parish church of Holy Trinity Parish, which included the slums of the Waterside. So generations of my family were baptised, married and sent on their final journeys here. Because of its position on a former island, Ely Cathedral can be seen for miles, and it's strange to think that for hundreds of years it's been there as a constant presence for the Fen people looking out over them. Peter Baker's sculpture of an eel sits in Jubilee Gardens in Ely, and it's a reminder of the importance of eels to Ely. The very name Ely means Eel Island. Eels were central to the medieval economy of the Fens, although the priory had the rights to all the eels caught within the city limits, which must have caused a certain amount of resentment amongst the townspeople. I can remember my dad in the 1970s going eel fishing and bringing loads of them home, but today the population of eels has declined rapidly. Ely Cathedral is popularly known as the Ship of the Fens, and you can see why. St Etheldreda established a monastery here in the 7th century, but it wasn't until the 11th century that building really got going on the cathedral. There was a terrible disaster in the 14th century when the central tower collapsed, but it was replaced by the beautiful lantern tower that's still there today. Here at Wicken Fen in Cambridgeshire is the last large tract of undrained fenland surviving. The undrained fens were home to many communities of people who relied for their living on eel fishing, sedge cutting and turf lifting. So when the fens were drained, these people lost their livelihoods, and as you can imagine, there was considerable anger. Many of the fen people fought back in vain against the drainage project, but here at Wicken Fen, they succeeded in holding back the drainers. And in the 19th century, it was recognised as a valuable nature resource and was the first nature reserve taken on by the National Trust. Wicken Fen is sedge fen, and parts of it are still used for harvesting sedge in the traditional manner for use in thatching. There's a 100-year plan to expand the fen and to recover land which was converted for agricultural use. Eventually, it's planned that the fen will reach all the way to the edge of the city of Cambridge. And this is what the drained fens look like, and as you can see from this potato crop, it's some of the best agricultural land in England. However, the consequence of the drainage is that the soil, which is peat rich, dries out very quickly and crumbles, and when it blows away you get a phenomenon known as a fen blow. The fen landowners were hard-nosed businessmen, and in 1630 they invited the Dutch engineer Cornelius Vermuyden to drain the fens. Vermuyden's first task was to cut 200-foot wide channels that run for 30 miles across the heart of the fens from Erith in Cambridgeshire to Denver in Norfolk. This is the New Bedford River, and it's completely man-made. It was put in as part of the 17th century project to drain the fens, and it runs parallel to the old river, which is about half a mile to the west. In winter, when the water levels get too high, they're allowed to flood into the area between the two channels, and that's what creates the washes, and it protects all the other land round about. The Ouse washes are a nationally important area for wildfowl, including ducks and waders, and especially the Buick and Hooper swans that overwinter here from Iceland and Russia. This road crosses the washes from Littleport to Welney, and it's often underwater in winter. The depth gauges behind me warn drivers not to risk it, but of course, some of them do. Draining the fens involved a complicated system of cutting channels and rerouting rivers as they crossed the area. They come back together here at Denver in Norfolk, which is the main control centre for keeping the fens drained. This is the River Great Ouse, one of the main rivers which drains the fens. Slightly further upstream, the River Lark and the Little Ouse have come out of Suffolk to join it, and just over there is the River Wissey, which flows through Norfolk. And on this side, the 200-foot levels that cut a straight line through Cambridgeshire. Further west are the River Nene and the River Welland. And here at Denver, Vermuyden designed and constructed a great sluice which controls the flow of the waters from the channels back into the Great Ouse. However, there was a certain amount of opposition from locals who saw their livelihood being destroyed by the drainage. Many refused to work on construction of the sluice, and some, who became known as the Fen Tigers, even went as far as sabotaging it at night. Because the draining of the fens caused the land to shrink, it became more liable to flooding, and so water needs to be continually pumped out of it. At first, this was done with windmills, and then later with steam power, and behind me is the Streatham steam pump engine, which is still in working order. Later on, diesel power was used, and nowadays it's electricity that stops the fens from flooding. Prick Willow, on the banks of the River Lark near Ely, was one of the villages that grew up after the drainage of the fens because of the agricultural work that was available. It attracted people from all over East Anglia. It's home to the Drainage Engine Museum, This was one of the pumping stations that, once the fens were drained, it kept them drained. And Vermuyden did not foresee one other thing, that reclaimed land shrinks, as anything must shrink that has the water squeezed out of it. And peat, above all, which absorbs water like a sponge, shrinks when it dries. The fens are shrinking. They're still shrinking and sinking. Land which was above sea level in Vermuyden's day is now below it, tens of feet below it. There is no exaggerating the dangers, the invitation to flooding, the diminution of the gradient of the rivers, the pressure on the raised banks, the faster flow of upland water into the deepening lowland basin. We're at Home Fen, and this area is below sea level. In fact, it's the lowest point in England. When they drained the fen, they weren't really aware of the consequences of taking all the water out of the peat, because the land shrinks. In the 1850s, this post was hammered into the ground here so that the top of it was at ground level. In the years since, the peat has shrunk so much that the whole of the post is now exposed. One of the problems with the drainage of the fens is that the land is still shrinking and sinking. Here on Shippy Hill railway station, part of the platform has started to lean at an alarming angle. We live with the illusion that everything's permanent. But here in the fens, the shrinking soil means that the telegraph poles lean and the roads subside, leaving bumps and wrinkles and dips and holes. Fens covers a huge area. I'm standing in Norfolk, but large parts of Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire are fenland, and they even extend into Suffolk. One of the things you notice about the fens is quite how few medieval buildings there are, and that's not surprising because most of the fens was underwater until the 17th century. However, if there are no medieval churches, what there are is a lot of old chapels. This is the old primitive Methodist chapel at Soham in Cambridgeshire. Like a lot of the old fen chapels, it's no longer in use, and now it's sinking slowly back into the soft fen soil. There's a strong spirit of nonconformism among the fen people, which is probably a legacy of the days of the fen tigers. The established church was treated with something like suspicion, and instead the average fen person worshipped God in small boxes set out in the fields. It's not just the flatness of the fens that strikes you, it's the straightness. Roads and railway lines cross it in all directions, as if they've been drawn by a ruler. I'm at Shippy Hill station in Cambridgeshire, close to the Suffolk border, but you'd have to wait here quite a long time for a train. There's only one a week, and it's one of the least used railway stations in the whole of England. Eel Island, an island in the fens where eels were to be found in abundance. And Ely is just one of many fen places whose names reflect the significance of islands in the fens. Place names that end in Y or EY or EA, from the Anglo-Saxon eg, meaning an island, or sometimes heath, meaning a landing place. Among them are Stuntney, Whittlesea, Thorney, Ramsey, Coveney, Quainey, Norney, Maney and Stoney. The EA endings in particular can seem unusual to outsiders, even difficult to pronounce. I've even heard Maney pronounced as Mania. Maney means the common island. Stoney is the Stone Island. Norney, the North Island, and so on. There's another bizarre feature of the fens, and that is bog oak, remnants of an ancient forest that once grew here before the fens became flooded. Many centuries ago, when the Fens were overwhelmed by water, these trees collapsed into the water and were then trapped in the airless bogs and preserved, so that after the drainage of the Fens in the 17th century, large tree trunks were often unearthed by the farmers' ploughs, dark remnants from a previous age, which the Fen people sometimes turned into furniture. There is an isolation about the Fens, a desolation even. The flat landscape and lack of trees accentuate the size of the sky, which often seems to be enormous in the Fens, brooding and overpowering. Ironically, clouds can seem like mountains here. This emptiness and flatness and straightness combine to create a landscape that many find melancholy or even depressing. In Graham Swift's book, Waterland, his narrator Tom Crick describes the Fens as a landscape which, of all landscapes, most approximates to nothing. And he goes on to say, to live in the Fens is to receive strong doses of reality, the great flat monotony of reality, the wide empty space of reality. Melancholia and self-murder are not unknown in the Fens. Heavy drinking, madness, and sudden acts of violence are not uncommon. It was time to leave. For generations, my families lived their quiet lives in the same small Fenland settlements, as still as water, with only the long dramas of birth and death, life and love as a counterpoint to their daily struggle to gain a living from working other people's land. Since records began in the 16th century, more than 30 Cambridgeshire parishes had my family in their records, being born, getting married, having children, and dying there. The men might go off to war, a girl might marry a man who took her looking for work elsewhere, but for most, there was a constancy, the familiar flat, straightened world that they knew so well, even if they didn't always love it. Above the relentless openness rose Ely, with its cathedral, and the 19th century brought the city industrialisation, jobs in the breweries, the gasworks, the jam factory, the waterworks. It brought homes in the long terraces of the waterside. But even more rapid change was coming, all over England. Roads and railways opened up the world, and the young Fen people set out to find work, love and adventure, to study in distant cities and never come home again. I left the Fens in 1980, and I've never lived here since. My only connections with these lonely parishes now are relatives, aunts and uncles in diminishing numbers, and cousins, and their children, and their children's children, spreading out like a wave far beyond the imagination of their ancestors. And yet, still, something remains, because even now, 40 years on, whenever I get on a train in the Fens to leave this strange and lovely landscape, I feel like I'm leaving home.